Well, dear colleagues, I think it's time to start our today meeting. First of all, I would like to welcome all our guests at our meeting organized by the School of International Regional Studies of the Faculty of World Economy and International Affairs, HEC University, as a part of series of online seminars, Contemporary Area Studies. And today we have the second lecture, actually devoted to quite special topic of Islamic finances. And I would like to say that this issue is now one of the common concern of the International Scientific Society. And today our lecture is called Islamic Banking Theory and Practice Gap and the Way Forward, delivered by our foreign guest from Tabata'i University, Dr. Ali Marvi. Dr. Ali Marvi, the floor is yours. Let me say a few words just about the schedule. We have today 1 hour for our lecture and the rest of time for questions. And we have a few participants today. We have enough time to discuss all this issue connected with Islamic finances. Thank you for participating already for the second time in our seminars.
You're welcome.
And greetings from Moscow.
Okay, just I want again thank you.
Then we have more time for discussions.
Yes. Again, thank you for actually giving me this opportunity to present this stuff on Islamic banking during the. Yes. So, do you have my slides?
Yeah, I see it. Thank you.
Okay, very good. If you remember, in the previous session, I explained briefly some features of Islamic banking in theory, actually. Today, I will explain what has happened in practice and the main gap between theory and practice in Islamic banks across the world, and briefly explain what's to be done by Islamic scholars and scientists in this field, actually. Okay, I concluded that in theory, we have PLS dominance in the Islamic banking literature. PLS stands for profit and loss sharing, and if you remember, I explained that two types of Islamic contracts, Muzaraba and Musharaka, are actually profit loss sharing, and even in terms of just by focusing on economic concerns and not Islamic concerns, these type of contracts are really good in terms that we know that conflict markets, if they will be happened in reality, are really good, because we know markets are complete if it's possible to trade at, let me move this here, okay, at a single point in time, and all the commodities that will ever exist, and we have no missing markets. And for this case, it's really simple to make policies and to withdraw inefficiencies. And we know that a contract is complete if it specifies the legal consequences of every possible state of the world. And actually, in this sense, if we can anticipate defaults and include that in the contract, we can assume that default does not occur, because we previously anticipated that, and we designed enough conditions for that case. And So, but we know that in the traditional debt contracts that is so common in conventional banks, contracts are extremely incomplete, and we know that the possibility of default is really high, and that's the reason that the regulation of banking system is so complicated and so hard and tough work for central banks. And we know that bankruptcy and inefficient liquidation actually is really possible there. And for these reasons, the capacity of debt is limited. And we know, I explained before that countries and corporations are highly leveraged, and during the time, this trend is even worsening, and the situation is really being more tough and tough in terms that countries and corporations are actually more and more highly leveraged, and the trend is still rising. And we know that high leverage implies inefficient risk-taking and needs regulation. But if PLS contracts are implemented correctly in the real world, we know that contracts are complete. And if we can solve the difficulties for exerting this type of contracts, we can actually prefer this type of contracts to the traditional debt contracts. And I didn't have enough time in the previous session to explain the two main Islamic contracts that are profit and loss sharing contract. The first one is Mudaraba. In Mudaraba, actually, we have this type of a generic Mudaraba transaction as illustrated in this figure. We have, let me activate this laser pointer. Okay. We have the capital provider, which is called Rabb al-Mal in the Arabic language, or Sahib Sarmaye in Farsi language. But I know that you're not familiar with Farsi or Arabic, so that's capital provider or Rabb al-Mal. And we have entrepreneur or Muzarib here, or Karafarin in Farsi, Muzarib in Arabic, and entrepreneur in English. And actually they signed a contract, the Mudaraba contract or Mudaraba venture. And the entrepreneur actually brings the management skills here, and the capital provider brings capital and profits to be shared, while when the project is successful and we have profits, the profits will be splitted between them based on the agreement that they signed in Mudaraba contracts. But the losses are solely borne by the Rabb al-Mal or by the capital provider. If the project is not successful and we have failure in the running of the project, we assume that the entrepreneur actually also burn the losses in terms of the labor force and the idea and the human capital that he or she did put in the project. This is Mudaraba. And so in the Mudaraba, one party brings the total capital, which is called capital provider or Rabb al-Mal, and the other party, which is called entrepreneur, brings the management skills and the profits is split based on the shares that are agreed upon in the contracts, but the losses are solely borne by the Rab al-Mal. But what about Musharaka? In the Musharaka, here we can see a generic Musharaka contract or transaction. We have here Musharaka venture, bank, and client. Actually, bank and client contributes capital to the Musharaka venture, and bank appoints client as the Musharik to manage the Musharaka venture. So in the first step, bank and client, both of them brings capital. Bank uses the capital of the depositor actually in the Islamic bank, and the client also brings part of the capital, and they sign a Musharaka venture or Musharaka contract, and bank appoints client as the Musharik, which means say in for the moment I cannot find an equal English language for that. The person that signs the Musharaka contract with the bank as an entrepreneur that also brings some part of the capital is called Musharik, and he or she manage the Musharika venture. Actually, the Musharik manage the Musharika contract, and when the project is realized, the profits or losses are actually realized, then we are in the stage 3. Profit and losses are shared based on the capital contributed by the partners. Actually, in the Musharaka contract, based on the capital contribution of both parties, the share of each one is defined on the contract, and the losses and or the profits are split between them based on their shares. So the difference between Musharaka and Mudariba, I guess, is clear to you. In Mudariba, the total capital is actually brought by one party, and labor or the management skill or is brought by the other party, which is called entrepreneur. But here, both parties contribute to the capital requirement of the project, and also in the Mudariba, actually, the losses are just borne by the capital provider. But here, both parties contribute to the capital of the project, and the Musharik that brings some part of the capital, actually he managed the project, but he or she will pay it by the wage. So when the project is realized, the profits and losses are realized, both parties will be actually obtain the profits or will be burned by their losses. So we can, and for Musharaka, we have different types of Musharaka. For example, Musharaka Mutanaqisa, which is diminishing. Let me move here. Partnership, and that means that means actually the Islamic bank will commit to the other party that if the project is successful, then I will sell my share during time to you, and you can actually buy my shares by using the profits of the project. and and this guarantees that the Islamic Bank will not actually will not be the owner of the firms in many firms in the economy actually. That's the مشاركة متنافسة which is diminishing partnership.
با واریانس وای یکسان نیست. توی دو تا ریگرسیون متغیر وابسته متفاوتی داریم.
Sorry, I can hear another voices here.
مقایسه
Anybody have any question?
No, I think that was the problem. Please, participants, mute your microphones, not to disturb the lecturer.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, Dr. Ahmed. Please continue.
The first bullet says also that مشاركة متناقصة or مشاركة منتهية بتملك متناهية بتملك means diminishing مشاركة. It's a type of a partnership where partner purchases the units of the share of the other partner gradually until that particular partner finally holds the full ownership of the asset or business. And this concept is a hybrid concept whereby it consists of the three contracts, which are musharika, partnership, ijara, leasing, and wad, or promise to purchase, or purchase undertaking. And actually, this hybrid concept is widely applied for home or project financing. So, in this musharika mutanaqisa actually consists of three Islamic contracts. But you know, the meaning is just simply diminishing partnership. That's not so much hard. And you can see musharika mutanaqisa by this schematic figure. Actually, you know, because this is not so difficult, I will move fast in the slides. In the first stage, we have musharika agreements or partnership contract to co-own assets. And in the second, that is this agreement is between customer and bank. For example, customer 10%, bank 90%. Then the purchase undertaking and customer undertake to make monthly musharika unit purchases to gradually reduces bank's stake and increase his or her share of the asset ownership. And so to guarantee this gradual moving of ownership to the customer, actually the ijara agreement is made, which says custom pay rental for using bank's stake in the assets. And when the whole share of the bank is moved to the customer, then notice of fulfillment is run and transfer of full ownership to customer upon fulfillment of musharika terms is happened actually. So that's not so difficult. And we can say these differences between musharika, mudariba and musharika. I told before, in mudariba, only one party contributes capital and only one party manages the business. And whereas we know that in musharika, both parties contribute capital and both parties can manage the business. The second difference is that in mudariba, capital must be in form of cash, but in musharika, capital can be cash in kind. And finally, in mudariba, loss shall be borne by the Rabbul Mal or the capital provider, but in musharika, loss shall be borne by the partners based on capital ratio. So, and I told you in the theoretical literature of Islamic banking, the main difference between Islamic banks and conventional banks is that Islamic banks are mostly operating based on PLS, profit loss sharing contracts, or these two types of contracts, Mudaraba and Musharaka. But what is happening in practice? Actually, I just explain 2 or 3 sample papers that investigate empirically what is happening in practice in some Islamic countries. For example, Chong and Liu published a paper in 2009, which is titled Islamic Banking, Interest-Free or Interest-Based. And they focused on Malaysia, and they show that only a negligible portion of Islamic bank financing is strictly PLS based, and that Islamic deposits are not interest-free but are closely pegged to conventional deposits. So it shows that in spite of what is explained in theoretical side of the Islamic banking, in practice, the major portion of Islamic contracts in Islamic banks actually are the other contracts that are similar in nature to debt-based financing. I told some of them before. For example, we have Murabaha, or we have some other leasing or some other Islamic contracts that are very similar in nature to the debt financing. The main difference between debt contracts and interest-based debt contracts is that in debt contracts, the contract must include special good or services, and the contract must be made actually to the specific good or service. But in debt-based financing, actually, you know, the ownership of the money is totally transferred to the other party, and the bank, the conventional bank, does not care what would be happened to that money. The main difference with the other modes of financing in Islamic banks and the debt financing is that in that Islamic contracts, the link between the banking sector and the real sector is guaranteed, must be guaranteed actually. But in the conventional bank, this is not the case. But we know that types of Islamic contracts are really similar in terms of, because we have also some kind of interest inside the contract in that types of Islamic contracts, in spite of this kind of profit and loss sharing. And we can see from this paper, for example, that in Malaysia, the major part of financing in Islamic banks are that kind of contracts, not PLS contracts. That's one example. The other one, Sharap and Sevik published a paper in 2015. It's titled The Behavior of Conventional Islamic Bank Deposit Returns in Malaysia and Turkey. And actually, they found that they focused on the empirical behavior of conventional bank deposit rates and the rate of return on retail Islamic PLS investment accounts. And they used monthly data from January 1997 to August 2010. And actually, they found long-run co-integration between conventional bank deposit rates and PLS returns. And also, they found the time varying volatility of conventional bank deposit rates and PLS return is correlated and is statistically significant. And also, they tested pairwise and multivariate causality, and they found that conventional bank deposit rates greater cause actually returns on PLS accounts. In other words, in both Malaysia and Turkey, that we have dual banking, we have both types of banking, Islamic banks and conventional banks. It seems that Islamic banks are follower to conventional banks, in the sense that at least the rate of, say, retail Islamic PLS contracts or PLS investment accounts is following the interest rates of conventional banks. So again, it seems that because we know if a PLS contract, either musharaka or mudaraba, is really executed in practice, then it does not make sense that these two types of variables, I mean, the PLS return and the interest rate, should not be correlated actually, because you know the PLS rate of return comes from the projects, and you know it really depends on the type of projects that the Islamic bank financed, or the performance of the managers that are posited in the other parts of the PLS contracts. And it must be the case that rarely the rate of return of PLS contracts is actually correlated with the interest rate of conventional banks. But you know, at least in this period of time, that is say more than 10 years, that's not the case. So they actually conclude that the PLS contract here is not really what is designed in theory. It's actually different from what is designed in theory. So that's another empirical paper. Hisham Hamza has this paper in 2016 whose title, Does Investment Deposit Return in Islamic Banks Reflect PLS Principle? By PLS Principle, I guess his meaning is clear to you, in the sense that we expect that really profits and losses are happened in reality, and it depends on the type of projects and on the mixture of the projects that are financed in different banks actually. And he also examines the compliance of investment deposit return with profit and loss sharing principle. He uses pooled regression model for a panel of 60 Islamic banks across different countries for the period 2004 and 2012. And his estimation actually shows that the management of investment deposit and PLS assets is characterized by a moral hazard behavior and excessive risk taking. In the sense that capital ratio and interest rate affect positively investment deposit return. In other words, we expect that in the PLS contracts, the rate of return depends on the nature of the project and the nature of the sector of the project, on the effort of the entrepreneur, on the macro situations of the economy. And so it's not be the case that we actually observe a significant positive relationship between the rate of return of the PLS contracts and the interest rate or the capital ratio. But still, it has happened for these 60 Islamic banks during this period. Also he found that there is no evidence of the impact of board of directors and Sharia board. You know, in the governance structure of Islamic banks, there is a body which is called Sharia board to guarantee the right, the correct, or the Sharia compliant execution of Islamic contracts. And it is actually, he found that there is no evidence of the impact of Sharia board on the rate of return. So the rate of return of PLS contracts actually is irrelevant of the existence of Sharia board or their effort, the level of their effort actually. And so that indicates also that what is happening in practice, it's really different from in PLS contracts, is different from what is, or should I correct myself, what is happening in Islamic banks. We saw in previous slides that's more focused on other modes of financing, rather PLS financing. And here Hisham Hamza showed us even in PLS assets and PLS investment, there is a positive correlation between the rate of returns of this PLS investment and interest rate, for example, or capital ratio. That's really, that indicates that what is also executed based on PLS contracts is somewhat different from what is designed in theoretical literature. These are the name of the banks that are covered in the Hisham Hamza's studies. We can see 60 banks in 15 countries. So just for your knowledge, I will share the slides with you so you can look at them in more detail. And also, or we have this study by Beck and his co-authors, which is published in 2011 in, I guess, Journal of Finance, which is A+ journal in the finance field. And the paper is titled Islamic versus Conventional Banking, Business Model, Efficiency and Stability. They have focused on 22 countries with both bank types, both conventional and Islamic banks. And they try to control for both time variance and country fixed effects, and they compared conventional and Islamic banks, and they argued that there is few significant differences in business orientation between Islamic banks and conventional banks. But so in the main finding of their study is that there is not a significant difference between Islamic and conventional banks in terms of business orientation, but there is evidence that Islamic banks are less cost-effective, but have higher intermediation ratio, higher asset quality, and are better capitalized. And they found that there is large cross-country variation in the differences between conventional and Islamic banks, and also there is large variation in Islamic banks with different sizes. And they also argued that even though we observe that the stock performance of listed Islamic banks is better than conventional banks, in particular during the recent financial crisis happened in 2007 and 2008. But they argued that is due to the higher capitalization and the better asset quality of the Islamic banks, actually. Or Bitar, Madias, and Taramaso published a paper in 2017, and they cited what makes Islamic banks different. And they use a multivariate approach. They use a data set with this number of banks, actually 8,615 banks, including 123 Islamic banks in 124 developed and developing countries for this period, 2006 to 2012. And they found that, again, Islamic banks are more capitalized. That is similar with the finding of Beck and his co-author. They found that Islamic banks are more liquid, again, and more profitable, but they have more volatile earnings compared to US and European banks. And however, they found similarities between Islamic banks and US and European banks in terms of liquidity and or should I correct myself, when they limited themselves, the sample, to banks operating in countries where both systems coexist, for example, Malaysia, Turkey, England, and they saw similarities between these two types of banking, Islamic banks and conventional banks. And so maybe some differences that they found at the first stage is due to country conditions or country fixed effects. And finally, they found that higher capital makes the returns of Islamic banks more volatile, while higher liquidity decreases the profitability of conventional banks. Okay, so we saw that from the empirical works that they are just a sample of empirical investigations by scholars in the Islamic banking field. We saw that in spite of the fact that PLS is dominated to the other modes of finance in the theoretical side, but in practice, a negligible portion of contracts that are executed by Islamic banks are really peerless. And even in the contracts that are peerless on the paper, what is actually practice is somewhat different from what is designed in the theory. So why this is the case? Dar and Presley actually have a paper which is even taught, which is published in 2000, but it has still useful insights to the reason behind this observation, behind this gap, which is observable between Islamic banking in theory and Islamic banking in practice. And they say that different explanations exist for this lack of peerless in Islamic banks. The first explanation that is also emphasized by many scholars in the field is the agency problems that are happening and in the peerless contracts. You know, we will have different types of agency problems which are arising because of informational asymmetry. For example, between the if the contract is mudaraba, for example, between the capital provider and the entrepreneur, you know, or between the bank, which is actually wakil, or which is the lawyer, some similar to the lawyer of the depositor, and the depositor, for example. The depositor, Islamic depositors, do not know really if the bank exerted its best effort to monitor the entrepreneur or not. So, and this type of agents problems actually could not be overcome unless the central bank actually designed and run suitable rating and scoring system for rating projects, for rating entrepreneurs, for rating different types of organizations. And we know that this type of rating system, is really absent in many Islamic countries because of the fact that their central banks are not expert enough to implement that kind of systems. The second explanation that they offer, but they offer based off what is presented by Islamic scholars, is that we have lack of well-defined property rights in many Islamic countries. You know, because in many countries that are exerting Islamic banking, it's really hard to guarantee property rights because the property rights are not well defined there. And that also worsen the agency problems, and that intensify the problem of moral hazard and adverse selection there. And so that is the second candidates to explain the lack of PLS in Islamic banks. The third is the restrictive role of shareholders in management. You know, in Islamic banks, actually, we have the owner of the banks that are really totally different from depositors. And so there is happening a big informational asymmetry between depositors and bank owners. And because in the PLS contracts, the risk is mainly borne by the investors or depositors, not by bank. Bank just will obtain its actually service fee, because it's in the Islamic banking, it's somehow a lawyer of the depositors actually. And so some Islamic scholars are good at banks, or the Islamic bank does not have enough incentive to follow the benefits of the investors. And because the investors do not play any role in the management of the bank, in the management structure of the bank. That's the other reason why these PLS contracts could not be successfully operated in practice, actually. And the fourth candidate is that because of severe competition from conventional banks, many depositors do not like, say, risky investment. They prefer to put their money to safe and risk-free investment, even though the rate of return is not so much high. And so that puts a force to the Islamic banks to move to other modes of financing rather than PLS contracts, or rather than Mudaraba or Musharaka. So that's the other explanation for this lack of PLS. Number 5 says that equity financing or PLS financing is not feasible for funding short-term projects due to the ensuing high degree of risk. One function of every bank, including Islamic bank, is to solve the problem of liquidity mismatch between depositors and borrowers, actually. And this kind of contract or PLS contracts make this function difficult for banks to perform, actually. And number 6 says that we have unfair treatment in taxation, actually. In every project, the interest which is paid by the entrepreneur or by the project manager or by the firm is regarded as cost, and it actually decreases even the total amount of the tax that the firm must pay to the taxation administrator. But in equity is taxed, because in PLS contracts the profit is taxed. So we have this kind of unfair treatment with these two types of taxation, these two types of contracts. I explained in the previous lecture that some people argue that's why this is the case, that the interest is free of taxation in many countries, in also many Western countries, but this kind of PLS contracts is actually fined by taxation. I quoted from Allen and Franklin in that lecture that Allen and Franklin actually, Allen and Carletti actually argued that PLS is better than that, but the reason that nobody encourage nobody actually is attracted by this type of PLS contract is that is this kind of incentives that are active by taxation system, and they also try to find a reason or a rationale behind this type of taxation, and they argue that that is just by accident. In Western countries, this type of taxation, that the debt contract is tax exempt, even it's tax preferred, because you know the interest is actually considered as a cost, and is it decreases the taxable income, actually the base of taxation, but the profit is what is actually taxed. And this is also the case in Islamic countries, and this also motivated Islamic banks to move to the other types of financing rather than PLS contracts or Mudaraba or Musharaka. So that is the number 6. And finally, they argued that in many Islamic countries, actually, we have the lack of secondary markets for trading in Islamic financial instruments. In particular, they don't have secondary market for Muzaraba and Musharaka. And actually, that's the reason that the banks cannot solve the problem of liquidity mismatch with this type of contracts. And so the banks, Islamic banks, if they put many of their resources to Mudaraba and Musharaka contracts, they have actually they will have very hard time to effectively mobilize financial resources, actually. So these are the main explanations that are presented by Islamic scholars for the lack of PLS contracts in practice. So, to sum, beside this lack of PLS contracts in practice, we might also observe other problems in some Islamic banks. For example, we may see non-compliance of implemented contracts with Sharia, not just for PLS contracts like Musharaka or Muzaraba, also for other modes of Islamic financing. And we may see, I told you, in other modes of financing also, the contract should be referred to a special good or services, but it might be the case that in the paper contract, what is written referred to a special, to the purchase of special good or services, but what is practice is that the borrower will actually buy some other goods, not what is referred in the written contract. So we may also see this kind of non-compliance of implemented contracts with Sharia law, or we can see some kind of paper reality gap in that kind of context that actually contradicts this main concern in Islamic banking, that the real sector and the banking sector, Islamic banking sector, should be tightened toughly together, actually. And this causes the other advantage of Islamic banking to disappear. And the link between financial and real sectors actually is no longer guaranteed. by this kind of gap. And the reason that this is the case in some countries is that mostly because of the fact that we have this connection between taxation system and banking system, you know, because if if Islamic banks use the information system of the taxation system to borrow people the money based on the Islamic contracts, then at least with the database of VAT system, value added tax system, we have this flow of goods and services, and you know, because of the tax, the incentive to move from the written contract to the false pass actually decreases a lot, and this kind of gap will be disappear. But unfortunately, in many Islamic countries, including Iran, this connection between taxation system and Islamic and banking system is not applied yet. And
Dr. Marie, let's say it will be like conclusions, so 5 more minutes for the lecture, and then let's take more time for discussions if it's
okay.
convenient.
Yes, yes. Actually, this is the last slide.
Oh, wonderful.
So based on what I presented in previous lecture and today's lecture, we will have some theoretical stuff in the future path of Islamic banking. Actually, the scholars in Islamic banking field should address agency problems by which arises in PLS contracts by designing micro foundations for these PLS contracts that address this kind of agency problems due to informational asymmetries. And also there is a sparse literature on the governance structure of Islamic banks based on incentive mechanism. The other reason that we have this lack of PLS contracts in what is in practice in Islamic banking, because of this, the lack of this kind of governance structure or incentive compatible governance structure. So the other line of research in Islamic banking could be this kind of issues. And I told you before that there is another issue that is really new and is mentioned recently by some Islamic scholars, is the type of money creation that is happening in conventional banking. And you know, because the Islamic central banking and the relationship between Islamic central bank and Islamic banks is really similar, even in theory, to the conventional banking. The similar type of money creation also happens in Islamic banks. And now many scholars are discussing that even this kind of events or this kind of this new phenomena is not compatible with Sharia, and that contradicts some principles in Islam. So that's another issue in theoretical side of Islamic banking. And finally, we have really sparse literature on Islamic central banking, and maybe this gap between theory and practice somehow dates back to this kind of these kind of issues that are absent in the theoretical part of Islamic banking. But what about policy issues? We need more macroeconomic and regulatory tools to decrease the gap between theory and practice. The Islamic countries must guarantee the link between taxation system and banking systems in order to decrease the gap that I mentioned between in other modes of financing in Islamic banking. And finally, you know that one tool that decreases the informational asymmetry in between different parties in PLS contracts is the accounting system. In many countries, or maybe it's also correct that in all Islamic countries, the accounting system that is actually enforced by Islamic banks is totally similar to the accounting system that is used by conventional banks. And actually, there is no rule for the accounting line to decrease the informational asymmetries between different parties in the PLS contract. So I guess I think the other policy issues for these countries is to use the type of accounting system that is more compatible with the operational procedures of Islamic banks. Sorry if that was boring, or that was, I guess I used a total of 1 hour, if I'm right. Okay. So that's it. And if you agree, I can start the questions that you sent before to me.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your today lecture. It was really so many details. So really, we looked into general theory of Islamic banking 2 weeks ago, also on our Saturday meeting, our Saturday lecture. And today we have detailed plan with different detailed information devoted to Islamic finances topic. And we got already several questions, maybe even more, as we have time for discussions. But let me to start. I just need to understand for general, for our guests, for our today participants. You know, in Russia, we have, so bank, it's a special organization that is allowed to give money, credits, by interest rate. And actually, what can be the definition, principal difference of the bank in Iran between bank and any, for example, trade company, any organization that can invest, can support money? Is there any special requirements for the bank to be according to Iranian law and Islamic law?
Yeah, actually in Iranian say economy, and the bank is really similar to the bank in other countries. The bank is an intermediary for monies actually that take deposits and borrow the monies to the borrowers actually, and to the lenders actually. And you know, the main difference between bank and other firms or organizations is that it must have a license
There is some noise on the line.
central bank, and also it must operate based on Islamic contracts that are mentioned in the in one of the main 2 laws of Iranian banking system that is called the interest-free banking operations law, or we call it in Farsi bankdari بدون ربا, or banking without riba, banking without usury.
And for me, like a foreigner, is it possible anyhow to open a bank in Iran? Or it's a privilege only from Iranian citizens, or how it is organized? Let's say a few words about the financial system of Iran, because I'm not sure that all our participants guests today know about it.
Yeah, actually, at the moment, because I told you, we have two mother laws in Iranian banking system. One of them I told is called banking operations without riba or without usury, and the other is the law, the money and banking law, which is say passed about 50 years ago. Based on that, and the first law that focuses on the operations of banks does not say anything about the establishing of a bank, but the banking law says some conditions for establishing a bank. They put put some. Let me just bring the latest.
Because, for example, lots of our guests may participate to get more information, for example, how to start business, how to work with financial organizations in Iran, and maybe just fill the gap of knowledge.
I see. Actually, the establishing a bank needs the license of the central bank. That's the say the baseline of the law, and in the central bank, actually, the license is given by a council, which is called Money and Credit Council. And but about the foreigners, the foreigners can be the owner of the banks, but the total shares of them could not be more than 40%, So if a foreigner wants to establish a bank in Iran, he or she can only own at most 40% of that bank. I just looked at the law. Yes, according
and do you have examples?
Article 31 of the Money and Banking Law. Okay. That's the condition for establishing a bank by foreigners. So actually, the foreigners
I should find somebody in Iran. I should find somebody in Iran to open together the bank.
Exactly. Yes. Exactly.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I also would give the floor to Svetlana Babinkova. I see her question in the chat. I may read it, or Svetlana may just unmute your microphone and ask this question, how it will be more convenient. This question is regarding how is the bank's client's profit evaluated when the asset is depreciated? Actually, the question is connected with the depreciation of the assets.
So, can you, because I was looking at the other question, can you again repeat the question?
Yeah, please. The question is regarding the depreciation of the assets. And the question is about the methodology, how the bank's client's profit can be evaluated when the asset is depreciated. So the process of the depreciation of the assets, for example, I don't know how many percents, it depends from the deal up to deal, and how in this case the profit can be changed in favor of the client or in favor of the bank.
You know, in Iranian banks, we have each bank actually has a pool of deposits, and from that pool actually borrows money to entrepreneurs or for financing in other modes of finance except the PLS actually. And in the PLS contracts, the depreciation is calculated based on accounting standards. There are many accounting standards that are adopted from IFRS actually, and based on that, they calculate the depreciation. But you know, if you deposit money in an Iranian bank, then they actually calculated the from the beginning to the end of the period, the average profit that the pool of monies obtained by different types of projects actually. That's not precise, but you know, that's kind of approximation, because at each point in time, many projects are ongoing. The final outcome actually is not realized yet, but they just say anticipate the profit based on what's practiced before actually. And to be more frank, actually, I must mention here that the number of PLS contracts that are really exerted in practice in Iranian banks is not so much high also. Here in Iran also, many banks moved to the other modes of financing rather than PLS contracts, Mudaraba or Musharaka. So now this is not the main problem to how calculate the depreciation rate of capital in order to calculate precisely the profit of the project or the profit of firms.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And regarding the second question from Asiyat Lukasheva about government, about the policy, and actually the question is about what is the approach of monetary policies in Islamic economy? If there is no interest rate, traditional one of conventional economies, on which the government can target. So traditional tools of government, according to the monetary policy, is of course interest rate going up and going down. This is one of the most efficient actually tool of monetary policy in Western world, let's say, for conventional banks. And how it is organized, how it can be implemented in Islamic finances.
Yeah, even so, in Iranian banking system, we don't have interest rate. But we have another variable that is similar to interest rate, which is called profit rate. And by profit rate, actually, the central bank means the profit rate of that pool of monies that I told you before, that each bank has pool of monies, and that pool belongs to different depositors actually. And you know, I told you before also that the non-PLS modes of financing actually have fixed rates of profit. For example, like what we can see in leasing. You know, in leasing. I mean, when you buy something and pay the price in regular future payments, that's really similar in nature to the debt financing, and the rate is really similar to the interest rate. But the only difference is that when you finance by debt financing, by debt loan, the other part that takes the money can buy anything, or even he can put the money in gambling or other things. He or she just committed to repay the money with the interest to the bank. But here the difference is that the money must be go to specific good or services which is written in the contract, but we have still a rate. We have still a rate which is similar to interest rate, but because here we have the commodity or the service, the good or service, we in Islamic banks, we say that that is the profit rate, not the interest rate. And this profit rate is the main policy tool of the central bank to say regulate banks or to control the money supply in the economy.
And is there any minimum of this profit rate allowed to any deal, or it can be, I don't know, less than 1%? Because they have like minimum for the interest rate in Russia, according to the Russian law, that we can give money, but not less than interest rate, less than, for example, the rate that is given by the central bank. Is there anything similar?
Actually, you know, because unfortunately we experienced high inflation rates in Iranian economy because of Dutch disease that we have been experiencing because of oil resources. We experienced two-digit inflation rates in last decades, and even now we are experiencing high inflation rates. So yes, we have this kind of ceiling or floor, or say the maximum rates for this profit rate, but the nominal amount is high. For example, here that rate is something between 15 and 18%, not 1%, the nominal, because you know the inflation rate is more than 30%, and that is the real interest rate or the real profit rate is so negative. The rate.
And actually, about the inflation, I have also a question regarding the inflation. And how do you think, what are the special tools, the most efficient tools in Iran in Islamic finances that can fight or anyhow enlight the influence of inflation, decrease the inflation somehow, the rate? How we can?
Yeah. Actually, the main problem with the Iranian economy is that the monetary policy is really passive. The fiscal policy actually dominated and dominates even now the monetary policy, and because of the budget deficit of the government, and because of the fact that one of the main sources of government financing in the budget used to be, and also now, is the oil revenues. Actually, you know, the monetary policy is always a follower to the fiscal.
It's limited.
Yeah, and that creates that created before high inflation rates, and still now. One consequences of this, the recent tough sanctions was that tough sanction because the sanction was put on the oil sector. The proportion of the oil revenues to finance the government budget actually was decreased, fortunately, to less than, say, 10%. If the government could manage to eliminate the oil revenues from the public financing of the budget, then we can figure out an active role for monetary policy to overcome inflation, actually. But until now, that was not the case, actually. And monetary policy has been always passive and was dominated by the fiscal policy. But if in the future, hopefully, the government could manage to remove the oil revenues from the public finance or from financing the budget, then the central bank actually has at least two instruments to manage for inflation targeting. The first one is the rate of profit that is similar to the interest rate to the government bond. You know, the Iranian government started to issue Islamic government bonds from say 4 or 5 years ago, and now the Islamic money market in Iran is being developing, and now it's going to be more deepening, so the government and the central bank can use that kind of government bonds for running open market, or something like open market operation, in order to say manage the money supply in the economy and to target the inflation. That's one instrument that is actually outside the banking system. And the other actually is the rate of profit that I told before. And by that rate actually, and also the open market operation that I told before, central bank can regulate money creation by Iranian banks, and also from that kind of path affect the supply of money in the economy and target inflation. So it has different types of instruments.
Thank you very much for your answer. And we have two more questions from Nikita Samopalnikov. He is a participant of our special project devoted to Islamic finances. And actually his question is, the first question is regarding foreign investments, FDI and sports portfolio investment. How is foreign money, foreign investment actually can be checked for compliance with the principles of Islamic banking? So is there any procedure for checking foreign direct investments or any foreign investments according to Islamic economy?
Yes, you know, for checking with the Sharia compliancy, we actually need to be ensured that it's not related to the blacklist that I mentioned in previous lecture. For example, it's not.
Who is responsible for it? Is there any special organization?
It's really as long as you want to invest in Iran in official ways, it's actually it's not possible, you know, because that kind of investment is not active in the formal sector in Iran. So automatically FDI does not go to that kind of investments. So unless there is some kind of investment by foreigners in the informal sector, that's so risky, and I don't think somebody will choose this option actually. But about the mode of financing, actually, if the fund that are brought to the Iranian economy wants to be matched with some funds from the Iranian banking system, you know, because the contracts that are running by Iranian banks are considered Sharia compliant by the central bank, so automatically it's okay for the system that even the fund that is matched with your resources, with the resources that a foreigner brings to the economy, so he or she does not need to check for the Sharia compliance. So that's okay. The only
Okay,
risk, yeah, the only risk. So even when
so there is no special procedure for it.
yes, because the system assumes that it automatically checks the Sharia compliance by Iranian banks and also the central bank. So that's not the responsibility of the say investors to check that, or the borrowers to check that.
Okay, and the second question actually is also from Nikita. It is known that Russia and Saudi Arabia have opened their own banks in other countries in abroad, for example, in Bosnia. And in order to control the flow of their investments in international projects through them, does Iran has such experience or such policy of influence of investments abroad?
Uh, actually, the if the system, the Iranian banks have also such visions in their minds, in practice, the number of projects that are financed by them is not so much noticeable. So I can say no.
So
At least
actually, and does do any Iranian banks have any branches abroad?
yeah. We have branches of some banks, for example, Bank Melli, or National Bank of Iran in London, in
London.
other European cities, but uh, I don't know if I don't think that they say finance big projects in that countries, because it's it's obvious to you, because of sanctions there are many restrictions to them to say run big projects, and they are then just, and they're just providing some services for say moving money from abroad to Iran and vice versa, and they are running some banking operations for the Iranian government, but their domain of activities is not so much high to run big projects there.
Okay, thank you very much. And we have also a question from Sharaf Naimov. Assalamu alaikum. What does tools hybrid for class conventional banks and Islamic banks can be used in those countries that are just developing Islamic finances, including Islamic banks? Hybrid tools. Actually, Mr. Naima, probably you can comment on it, what you actually meant by tools.
Let me again, what tools hybrid for class banks and Islamic can be used in those countries that are just developing Islamic finance, including banks. Actually, in countries that are experiencing dual banking, I mean, they have both types of banking system, Islamic banking and conventional bankings. Actually, these two type of banks are totally separated from each other. Even they have different, different money market between banks. So the money market between banks is separated from each other, but they are operating under unique regulator. Actually it depends on the regulator that develop some kind of hybrid tools actually to interact between these two type of banks, because maybe conventional banks uses some modes of finance or some type of instruments that are not forbidden in Islam. Actually, maybe in that kind of operations, these type of both types of banks can contribute, can cooperate, but it depends on the regulator that if it allows that kinds of operations between these two types of banks or not.
Okay, thank you very much. And I also know that it will be, let's say it will be one from the very last question, because we have already 1 hour and 45 minutes discussion, lecture and discussions, and I appreciate your time and given to us for today evening. And actually, maybe the very last question will be from me regarding, there is such a practice abroad, for example, in Europe or in US, opening not Islamic banks in general, but Islamic windows, let's say Islamic financial windows. How do you think, what can be more efficient in conventional system for countries that actually don't have dual financial system like Islamic and conventional banks, but mostly working only according to conventional rules of the banking? And maybe this Islamic windows can be a good opportunity for spreading Islamic finances abroad. What is your opinion about actually this practice, this mechanism?
Actually, it's a bit difficult to explain this question in more detail. It depends on on your understanding of Islamic banking. If you understand Islamic banking just at the level of operations or contracts, that could be okay, because even a conventional bank will sign an Islamic contract with the depositor or with the investor, actually, and that's okay. That's okay. And it's enough to be sure that the banking operation of that window is totally separated from the other side bank, actually. And at least for banks, for conventional banks, that could be a good strategy to actually track Muslim customers. That could be a way of marketing, at least for them. But if we go beyond and actually we understand Islamic banking in more depth and in a way that not just the operation at the banking level, but also the relationship between this bank and other banks must be based on Islamic concerns, then that could be a good start for the Islamic banking, but that's not a good station actually. The whole bank must be, say, changed to Islamic bank, and also these Islamic banks must cooperate in a money market, interbank money market, or interbank market that is compatible with Sharia. And if we go even further, for example, we have some Islamic scholars that say this kind of money creation in banks, either by Islamic or by conventional bank, is not compatible with some Islamic principles. For example, we have a principle that says, I'm trying to translate it to a good expression. In Arabic, we say أكل مال بالباطل, or in Farsi we say خوردن مال به ناحق. In Persian, in English, we can say contradicting the, I will explain to you. When banks creates money, actually because of the fact that this money contributes to the inflation, the banks creates money from nothing. They create money because they are banks and because the central banks allow them to create money. But we know that because of their money creation, we will see inflation in the economy. And by inflation, we know that the purchasing power of the people that actually owns money before, the people that owned money before, so the purchasing power of their money will remove to the bank, to the commercial banks. And in some Islamic scholars say that that's not actually just, that contradicts Islamic spirit. And so there is another approach that is now being appear, and I guess in the next years we will actually hear more about them. They say that Islamic banking should arrange a totally different system, banking system, that finance the production activities without allowing these commercial banks to create money and actually obtain the purchasing power of other people without their allowance, and actually take some rents. And so that's another approach. Based on this approach, even this type of Islamic banks are not so much compatible, totally compatible with Islam. It depends on the level of your understanding of Islamic banks. If you just consider the Islamic contracts in the operational level, the window of Islamic window is okay. If you want to consider even the interbank market to be Islamic, that's not okay. If you consider this kind of money creation concerns, even the total system with this kind of Islamic banking is not okay. You must construct a totally different system. Sorry for being long in its explanation.
No, thank you very much. Thank you actually for our today discussions and for all the participants that actually devoted this Saturday evening to lectures and to discussions. I see that Sharaf Naimov
I will,
thank
yeah, I
you for
will
your
type my
answer.
email address.
And I just wanted to say that we really appreciate our cooperation with Tabata'i University and with you, Dr. Marie, and your willingness
You're
to give us
welcome.
2 lectures and to enlighten Islamic financial regulation rules in general and in details to our audience. Thank you very much. Thank you for today. For today's lecture, and we are looking forward to hearing you again and be in contact, because you see today we have really interested people in Islamic finances, and my project group and other students really appreciate you for your time and lecture. So
Thank you.
I just give you a minute. I suppose you are writing down your contact email to the chat.
Yes, yeah, I sent my email address in both Sharif University and Allama Tabatabai University. It was really, I'm actually really happy to have this opportunity to present this stuff to you. I would be happy to be in touch with you and with the students. Please do not hesitate to contact me by these email addresses in case of any questions or any suggestions. Okay, and I hope we will be in contact more with the Higher School of Economics in the next future.
Thank you very much, and I wish everybody a good evening and see you again.
Okay, see you again and goodbye, everybody.
Yeah, goodbye. I'm finishing now our conference. Thank you again.